near the end of our physical lives, the veil becomes thin between the spiritual realm and the physical realm, which is why a lot of people report to having seen people who have already crossed while they're on their deathbeds. She learned how to manipulate the television initially. It was a Roku smart TV. And so the very first attempt at communication, she turned the television on, navigated to the search bar, and typed the word hello.
Kia ora, hello, welcome back. This is the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Today we're going to be chatting a really interesting part of life-death experiences in between. We're talking about the afterlife and communicating with the afterlife. If this is something you're interested in, just pop back to season 11 where we have a whole season dedicated to after-death communication. Personally, I love this topic. It kind of scares me a little bit, but I find it really interesting. And today I'm joined by my guest, who is Brandy Anderson. She has had some pretty profound experiences and brought them all together to the point where she wrote a book. Her book is called Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife. This gets me excited because that title itself just, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know this is what happens for me. I get excited by all these topics. We're going to get straight into it. So, Brandy, first of all, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. It's great to have you here for a podcast conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's really great to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I can feel it already. Your story, how do we start with your story? Where does it all sort of begin?
Yeah, well, back in 2014, I had a spiritual awakening that sort of sent me on a journey of seeking out ultimate truth. So I spent years just like studying scripture because I was coming from a Christian perspective. My family was a Christian family. Although I was not plugged into any particular faith at that time, I was living my life just completely unplugged from the church. So I was not in any real way a religious person. But that spiritual awakening prompted me to plug back into some churches and begin to just pour over the scriptures, read volumes, study, just really digging deeply into theological and philosophical matters, trying to make sense of what happened to me. And so from there, as I began on that journey, I just really found mainstream Christian answers to life's most important questions less than satisfying. And so I ultimately landed in a more contemplative space, or what would be maybe called Christian mysticism. And I found a lot of peace and refreshment in that space because there's a lot of room for mystery. It's a place where it's more experiential and less cognitive. So it was more about, like centering prayer practices, which is basically meditation, and just, finding your own inner balance, doing your own shadow work, that kind of thing that leads to peace and wholeness without wrestling so much with the conceptual side of things. And then while I was in that space, it was 2021, my grandmother came to the end of her physical life. And she had broken her hip about a year prior. And so her decline over the coming months, it was a gradual decline that ultimately led to her death, her crossing. But she was afraid to die. She was deeply afraid of death. And so as she came to the end of her life, she really resisted and she struggled against it. She wasn't ready to cross. She was 95, so she had lived a really long and pretty healthy life, up to that point. So she had had a full life, you could say, a good life, but still there was a sense in her that she was just deeply afraid to cross. And she was a Christian who had spent time in, her whole life in the church. She had read the Bible, studied the scriptures, did the Sunday school, all the things, and still she had no deep assurance within her that she would be safe in her crossing. So I should back up and say that when we near the end of our physical lives, the veil becomes thin between the spiritual realm and the physical realm, which is why a lot of people report to having seen people who have already crossed while they're on their deathbeds. And so this thin veil, that's already thin prior to someone crossing as they gradually decline, it opens up entirely at the moment that a person crosses. And it's just called a portal. And it's usually an instantaneous phenomenon where a person just slips from the physical into the spiritual, and then the portal just closes, immediately behind them.
Mm.
But in my grandmother's case, she was really resisting crossing. So when it came her time to cross, to slip through that portal, she put up a fight. And it caused her to become stuck. And it's what some people would refer to as being an earthbound spirit. Um, but in probably it was a very short amount of time, she became unstuck. She didn't stay stuck very long, but she was stuck long enough that her portal remained open. It didn't close behind her. And so it left this open door, if you will, between the physical and the spiritual, so that once she had crossed and gained some perspective about her situation, she was able to come back through that portal and manipulate the physical realm in ways that she would not have been able to without a portal. And so, probably a month after she had crossed, maybe a little over, she learned how to manipulate the television initially. It was a
Oh.
Roku smart TV. And so the very first attempt at communication, she turned the television on, navigated to the search bar, and typed the word hello into the search bar. And my family, who live in the house, ran out shrieking in
Oh.
complete fright. They were
I
horrified.
bet. I bet.
Yes.
I literally am covered in goosebumps. I love all of
Yeah.
this stuff, but it does kind of freak me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet they did.
Yeah. I mean, they called me immediately, and they were just, I mean, they were beside themselves. They were crying. They were talking over one another. They had me on speaker so that they could all talk. And, they were really rattled by what had happened. And, I didn't really know what was happening at that time, but I suspected at that moment that it might be a hacker, that someone was playing a prank on them or
Mm.
something to that effect. So I just encouraged them to check the perimeter for any activity, check the cameras to see if they could, if anyone was near with like maybe a remote or an app or something, just playing a prank. And then I was concerned that it may be somebody had hacked into the system, like with Alexa or just
Mm.
anything like that. So I encourage them to just go in and be rational and logical and seek out the source of whatever this was. But this persisted. So when they were afraid, the TV, as soon as they responded in fear, the television just shut off. But within a couple of days, it happened again. The TV turned on by itself, navigated to the search bar, and this time the word love appeared. But they were rattled, and so
Yeah.
they ran out shrieking in fright. Um, and so it persisted, though. They saged, cleansed the house. They prayed in case it was something spiritual, looked for
Mm.
some sort of physical explanation, could find none. And finally, my mom and I went to visit. And while we were there, the television, again, it popped on by itself, navigated to the search. And I think it was love was the first word. And I just encouraged everyone. I was like, let's just sit here and engage with this and see what it is. It's not stopping. My aunt had moved out of the house. She was so frightened. I was like, it's really affecting the quality of your lives. So let's try to get to the bottom of it. And but as we interacted with whoever it was that was typing these messages, as we engaged with the person communicating or the whatever was communicating with us, it became quickly apparent that it could not be a hacker or someone in the physical realm at all, because whoever it was could read our thoughts in real time. And they knew things about us that like no one knew, deeply personal things that we had never shared with anyone.
Oh.
And they would issue these, uh, well, initially it was that they were reading our thoughts. And I said, "Are you reading our thoughts?" And she said, "Yes." And so then we started to test it. We would think something and wait. And I mean, the response would issue immediately. She knew exactly what we were thinking. And that rocked us. So once we realized that it could not be someone in the physical realm manipulating the television, we ruled out hacker as a potential cause of this activity. Our next concern was that it might be something malevolent. Coming from a Christian perspective,
Mm.
the idea that it might be demons, that was really playing heavy on our minds. And so
Mm.
with trepidation, we continued to interact to see if we could determine, is this something good or bad or what's going on here? But in time, we did determine that it was my grandmother. because of her great love and devotion for the family. She stayed specifically to speak into some things that needed speaking into. She apologized for some past hurts, but more than that, she could see destructive patterns in people's lives, mental health issues that needed addressing. And so she spoke into that with a lot of clarity and love and truth. And it brought a lot of peace and healing. And she even saved some lives in some instances with the things that she was able to see and address from her
Wow.
vantage point. So yeah, I'll stop there and see if you have questions from here. I mean,
Oh,
but yeah,
yes,
that's
I
kind of
do.
how it all happened. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Brandy. So many questions. Yes. Fascinating. But yeah, when you said that, I literally, it's probably me, but so my mind just kicking in, covered in goosebumps. And I was like, oh, because I love all of this, but I always say, I want to have an experience. I've never seen, do we do we say the word ghost? Ghost seems like such a spirit. I don't know. Ghost just doesn't seem like the right word. But I've
Yeah.
never seen a physical spirit. I've sensed a lot. I've sensed beings around me. I've had an experience with my father who passed, but I never physically saw him. And
Yeah.
so I'm always like, I want to see it, but not when I'm home alone, not when it's dark, not if there's a thunderstorm. And I
Yeah.
put all the criteria on it. And I've heard as well that if you put the criteria on, it probably won't happen. So
Yeah.
maybe I've like boxed myself off too much that I can't have the experience. But there's a part of me that really, really wants it. And then a part of me that just wants to run away from all of it. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I find it so interesting. And I think you're so brave to engage. And it sounds a little bit like you've been quite a center post for your family as well, in terms of you've been the one to be able to say, hey, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's actually work out what's going on here. So I think you're quite brave. I think you're very strong. I've got, yeah, like I say, so many questions. One thing that I find really interesting, I've also got quite a Christian background, quite a spiritual background in that way. You talked about things potentially being a bit demonic, about how we don't really necessarily engage in that
Mm.
way. That's
Yeah.
demonic. We shut it down, we have faith.
Yeah.
And what was that like for you to actually engage and to communicate with, I guess, spirits? We're kind of taught not to. Brandy, I don't even know
Yeah.
how to make this into words. Do you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
I do. It really resonates. I would say that there was a time in my life where I probably wouldn't have engaged because I find mainstream Christianity to be very fear-based. And speaking from my own personal experience, coming through that tradition, I was engaging with my faith with a lot of fear for a lot of years. So it wasn't until I had kind of shifted out of that mainstream evangelical faith system that I was able to find some liberation, freedom from that fear, and really drop into more experiential, like a loving, more expansive way of being. It's hard really to even articulate it, but um, yeah. So I was in that contemplative, more mystical space when this happened, and I think that allowed me to be able to just engage with whoever or whatever it was well, to get to the bottom of it for one thing, but also the metaphysical implications of it. I mean, my beliefs had sort of shifted, so they weren't so dualistic or dogmatic. I was open to whatever truth may be, even if it blows my life apart. That was my thing. My whole journey was from the time I had the spiritual awakening and moving forward. My entire journey was wrapped in that thought. I just want the truth, even if
Mm,
it turns out to look nothing like I anticipate or what I'm comfortable with, or even if it blows my life apart. I just want the truth. And so
mm,
that's just, it just very much is the way that I am. I'm just kind of geared up that way. So for me, it was about what is true here. Let's find what is really happening here. And if it did turn out to be demons, then we would have to deal with that. But in my way of thinking, you have to know what you are dealing with in order to move forward. It wasn't going away. Ignoring it was not
yeah.
making it go away for my family. So for me, it was just about let's engage with this and see exactly what's going on so that we can determine what we need to do next.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that because I think we should remain curious. I think if we can't ask questions and we can't step outside of the parameters, I kind of go, oh, I think something might be a little bit wrong here because we should be able to be curious about anything and everything because there's so much in our world, our realm, our non-physical realm. It was your grandmother.
Yes,
Do you think she knew that she was dead?
she did. Yes, she
How
was
did you
very
ask
aware.
her?
Yes. Well, I mean, in time we had, a lot of conversations with her. In fact, I still have communication with her. So I've had sustained communication with her for 3 years now. And so
Wow.
we've covered a lot of questions in that amount of time. But yes, she did know. She knew that she had already crossed. And not only was she deeply aware of her current situation and state of being, she was deeply aware of all of ours. When we cross, we're able to see with clarity into the depths of people and situations. We can see into the heart of individuals and circumstances. So truth. I mean, you can't here in the physical. We can live in duplicity. We can lie to ourselves and others. We put on a mask. Some things we're just unconscious of. I mean, it's not even an intentional lie, so to speak. It's just more of the unconscious repressed material. We're able to live a lie. We're able to push things down and not address certain things or become aware of certain things about ourselves that maybe are too painful to admit. But on the other side, you don't have that benefit. You see with clarity the things about yourself and also others. So yeah, she had insight into all of us that really rocked us.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I find you said something earlier about how when you're coming to the end of life, it's almost like a veil. It's like I can't remember the words you used. Did you say the words veil?
Yeah, it's a veil
A veil
between.
between
Yeah.
worlds. So it's not that you're fully in one and that veil gets a bit thinner at end of life. So I believe this. I've talked before, I don't necessarily think that death is a point, a moment. I think it comes and goes as we almost dissolve into two realities here and the afterlife. So I liked what you said about that. So she knew she was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Did you talked about the portal, and I really liked the way you described this. Did the portal close at any point? Did she have any control over the portal? Because you're still talking to her 3 years later. Is it
Yes.
in the same sort of way?
Yes. She can use any electronic devices though, so not just the television. She can print out things on the printers. She could use the laptop,
Oh,
the computers if she wanted, but primarily she uses the television. That seems to be her favorite.
yeah.
But if she wants to say more, she will use the printer to print out more words at one time. But yeah, so her portal remained open, and because she uses it, she is engaging with it. It continues to remain open. You can close portals, but on my end, see, here's the thing about closing a portal, and there are people who go into these places that are haunted with like malevolent spirits, entities,
Hmm.
and they attempt to cleanse the place and close portals, is what they're trying to do. But if you can't see into that realm, and I cannot, then you don't know if you're closing the portal with someone still stuck on this side. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, so it's important to know to be able to see into that realm before actually attempting to close a portal. Although we would not want to close my grandmother's. That was kind of an aside that I was throwing in there. But yeah, her portal remains open and it continues to give her access to communicate with us.
Yeah. Wow. Have you ever seen her physically?
No,
So it's all
no.
done through words and
Mhm.
technology and printers and
Yes.
TVs and
It
oh my
takes, I
goodness.
should say that, yeah, it takes a lot of energy for spirits to manipulate the physical
Hmm.
realm, to send their loved ones signs, things like that. And if there is no portal, it takes even more energy. So it can be really difficult for them to send signs or to have any sort of communication with this side without a portal. And even with a portal, it still takes a considerable amount of energy for them. So, so that is one factor, to keep in mind, with the communications or whatever. But because she has that portal, she has the ability to type the words. That's fairly easy, but to manifest so that we could see her would take a lot of energy, she says. And so she's never done that. And I think you were saying if you close yourself off, it limits you. I think that's true, to some degree, but also it on their end, it's just a matter of them being able to have enough energy to make themselves visible to people who don't have the gift of seeing, like clairvoyance.
Yeah.
But people go into haunted places and they see ghosts, even when they're not necessarily open to it. So really the main factor in that is that the spirit has enough energy and the inclination to want to show themselves to someone.
Yeah, and it sounds like she really did. She wanted to come back with messages and leave her mark with you, still be with you. So I find it
Yes.
interesting because you said she was afraid of dying. She didn't want to let go. She was kind of hanging in there at 95. Do you think that she will do this forever, or will there come a time when she can choose to close the portal? Or how much free will do you think she has about being between these two worlds?
I think she's completely free.
Yeah.
So free will, 100%. And she tells us that she's not leaving. She says that she's content, she's happy, she's able to continue
Yeah.
doing her inner work and that kind of thing on the other side. So she's not stuck and she's not in a bad way internally or externally. And she's where she wants to be. She's content to be with us because she has the portal. So she says she's not planning to leave. But she could if she wanted to. And
Yeah.
she has connected us with other loved ones because she has this portal. She can allow anyone to communicate with us that she
Oh,
wants to
wow.
allow. Yeah. And so like my
That's,
grandfather who crossed when I was 17, he was able to come through and communicate. But there are instances where certain loved ones have communicated with us at the portal, but they don't stay at the portal. They move on into what my grandmother refers to as the beyond. And so they wouldn't be content to just hang out on this astral plane
yeah,
and,
right.
and hang out at the portal and talk to us. So they have went on in their journeys into the beyond, continuing their evolution, their growth.
So has she been to the beyond, or is she still just staying back?
I don't think she's even been into the beyond. She continues to hang back, although you can be multiple places at once
Well, yeah, this is
in this
true.
in spirit, and so she kind of has some insight into that. But I don't, she's never just left the portal to go completely into the beyond as some people do. And
Yeah.
in order to be able to communicate, she has to be, I say 100%, but we're never in spirit 100% in one location. I mean, space and time is an illusion in reality. So, but, and it's above my pay grade, so it's hard to even articulate or understand what that means. But
Yeah.
I do realize that, like my grandfather, who died when I was 17, when we continued to ask about him, she would tell me that, you know, that she had communication with him in some aspect of however that works, but that he was in the beyond, and so he couldn't talk. And then maybe a few weeks after that, he was at the portal and he was able to communicate, like type words himself. So there was some aspect of that where he had to get back to the astral plane in more like I guess a more holistic way to be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
communicate. But I really don't understand completely. I mean, it is too much for our finite brains to comprehend, I think.
Yeah, definitely within this realm. Um, Part of me's a little bit sad for her because I love to experience all sorts of things and I'm always like, let's go squeeze the juice out of life. Part of me's a
Yeah.
little bit sad for her, go, oh, just go beyond, go
Yeah.
play, go see what it's all about. And
Yeah.
then part of me would be sad because I think that might be the end where the portal could close.
Hmm.
I don't know. You said she was happy, so she's no longer
Yeah.
afraid.
No.
Okay.
And that's the thing. I mean, we want her to be first and foremost as much of a gift as this portal has been and the things that I have learned. And it's just really, it's made me a better person. It's really deeply affected all of our lives in profoundly beneficial ways. But At the end of the day, we really just want my grandmother to be content and happy. So if she were to say, "Hey, I want to go into the beyond," I'm not happy here, we would want her to go.
Yeah,
It would be
yeah,
bittersweet, but it's her choice, 100%. In fact, when she first was communicating with us, I thought she was stuck in a way that she needed our help crossing. That was my
yeah.
limited view of things. I thought, oh, she's stuck. She needs our help, as if we could help her with. I mean, she's the one who she sees into our situations with such clarity. There's hardly anything that we could, actually tell her or insight that we could give her that she's not already aware of. But yeah, so yeah, it's one of those situations where if she wanted to move on into the beyond, she could and she would.
Yeah, yeah, okay. What about, I'm thinking quite a bit further down the track. What about when you die or
Mhm.
your family die? Like, how long does this last for?
Yeah, and I haven't asked her this question specifically, but I get the impression that once we have crossed, though she wouldn't stay any longer. We would just all continue on in the journey on the other side in some capacity. She's really staying for the people who live in that house who lived with her at the time that she crossed. I mean, which is not myself. I don't live in the house that she crossed in. And although she has really, really helped me and answered a lot of my nerdy philosophical and theological questions, and I'm so grateful for her for doing that. That's not why she stayed. She didn't stay to give me that information. She stayed because of her connection to those people and the ways that they needed some help from her. She could see things, she could see patterns in their lives. She could see things that needed addressing. And also a couple of other relationships. She needed to apologize for some things. So that's her main motivation, to stay with those people, to help them, to watch over them, to be close at hand. So even without the portal, she probably would still have lingered and kind of hung out, trying to guide them and help them as best she could.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I hear a lot of people, especially if you go back to season 11, whole season around this conversation, people talking about how they're okay after they've died. I'm okay, don't worry about me, I'm okay.
Hmm.
And I love you. And it's all about the love and
Yeah.
yeah, just making everything good again. So I like what you're saying. It feels really good. I'm curious whether this is really common because when I started to delve into this topic and started to research it a bit more, I was like, man, this is everywhere. So many people are having these after-death communication experiences. Do you think it's quite common that people are there with the portal open, that they're not going to the beyond, they're staying connected to the physical people here?
I think that open portals are more common than we would probably intuit. And my grandmother tells me that there are a lot of instances where there are open portals, but the people who live in the homes are afraid. And so the person who has crossed, they just stop trying to reach out. My grandmother was persistent, with my family. Once they would be frightened, she would stop in the moment, but then she would give it a couple days and try again. And she continued until, I sat down and communicated with her, and we began to see that it was really her. And then we had a lot of peace and comfort, from it. But initially, people tend to be frightened, and so if it's your loved one, they don't want to scare you. And also, they can see our
Yeah.
internal heart postures. So they can kind of see, engage if someone is closed to it in a way that they will never open to it, that they would never, even if they knew it was their loved one, that they could, be open to the communication. And so in those instances, those people may move on into the beyond and let the portal just close, because if they can't utilize it and actually communicate, and that's what they want. They want to communicate very badly. Um, and she also tells me that hospitals are full of portals because so many people die in
Yeah.
hospitals. So it's not uncommon for people to leave portals when they cross. But it is uncommon for people to have sustained communication with the people who live in the houses, because people tend to be afraid of that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, right. And it takes so much energy for the person
Yeah.
who's passed to be able to communicate. Yeah.
Yes.
We hear a lot of stories around people who so desperately want to hear something. They want a message. When you're talking about the printer print, I was like, oh, I'd love that. If my dad could just send me a printer piece with all of the text, oh, that would just be
Yeah.
the best thing, the coolest thing in the world, not even in the world, outside this world.
Yeah.
So many people absolutely just crave connection, especially in the earlier days when the loss is quite raw, quite fresh,
Yeah.
and yet they hear nothing. And then you hear of stories where people who aren't necessarily pursuing the communication, they aren't trying to hunt it out or really going after it, and they get really vivid communication. Why do you think that is? Why do some people get it and others don't?
I think there's multiple factors, multiple reasons for that. One reason might be that the person is really, when we cross, I should say this, that when we cross, we take with us whatever level of consciousness we have attained up to that point. That goes right with us.
Mm,
So this idea that we go to heaven or hell is erroneous, and really it's a state of being that we carry within us, even here in the physical and on into the spiritual realm. But if a person has a lot of psychic material that they've sort of carried with them, they have to do their inner work. And that takes, it's an energy drain for people. And so some people are bogged down with that, when they initially cross. My grandmother tells me there's a fire that everyone passes through, and it's a cleansing fire. It's meant to be restorative, not retributive, but it burns away essentially anything that interferes with love. And so if you had a lot of inner junk and you had not really done any of your inner work, that can be particularly painful. And you can be bogged down for a time dealing with your own psychic material, so to speak. My grandmother just calls it doing your inner work.
mm,
So that can take your energy. That's one factor. Another factor is that some people, and the reincarnation. That's a part of that was not a part of my worldview until my grandmother crossed and told me that it was true. But my grandmother tells me that some people might impetuously reincarnate too soon, like soon after, because it's a free choice. We get to choose ultimately when or if we reincarnate.
okay.
And it's best to wait for your soul group, is what she tells me, and kind of do life again with the same people that you accumulated your karma with, so that you can work
Mm,
out all of those karmic aspects with the same soul group. But some people, either they miss the physical too much, or they like deeply attached to the physical realm in a way that they're not able to kind of do their integration, in the spirit realm, and they will impetuously pop back into the physical. And that may be why they're not communicating if they have done that. Um, so there can be, also without a portal, it is very difficult for them to communicate. To send explicit, communication, like a typed message, like what we get.
mm,
So that's a factor. And also, they probably are sending signs, but we are missing them. That's the thing too. How far up in your head are you? Are you really centered? Are you in the present moment? Are you paying attention, to
mm,
to what's arising in the moment?
mm.
Or are you lost in thought? Are you worried about things? Or, and so we tend to be lost in thought. And my grandmother tells me most signs are right there in front of you, but you're lost in thought and you never see them. So that's a factor too. We're looking for something to just fall out of the sky and and
Yeah,
strike us. But it's much more subtle than that. Spirit is very subtle, and
yeah,
this material world shrouds it, and it clouds what's really real. See, the spiritual realm is what's really real. And the
mm,
physical realm is really just an illusion. It's not, it's transitory, it's passing
yeah.
away. But we get so enamored by the physical that we can't see the spiritual. So it's just a matter of learning to center yourself and see with a more non-dual uh, perspective, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think even when the sign comes, we can then go, oh, but was that really them? And question
Right.
it, which kind of shuts down the ability for it to come through.
Hmm.
So much of what you say makes sense to me. We are very focused on this physical world. Personally, I really enjoy this physical world. I mean, it's hard at times, but I'm not done yet.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can kind of relate to that of wanting to get back with your loved
Mhm.
ones. You raise so many things. I've got I'm trying to choose which tangent to go down. So you talked about heaven and hell. You talked
Mhm.
about this fire. Um, Heaven and hell with such a strong, I guess, Christian belief system behind you. What are your thoughts on heaven and hell? Is heaven the beyond? Is hell that fire, the cleansing fire?
Yeah, that's a really great question. But my view of, I would really, Jeff Foster, there's a quote from Jeff Foster that I think is simple, and it really encapsulates what heaven and hell is. But he says, heaven is this moment, and hell is the burning desire for this moment to be different. And that really is it. We get lost in our thoughts, and that is hellish because then we create all of these mental narratives and scenarios, and we get pulled out of the present moment where that's where life is, right? And
Mm,
in the present moment, the past and the future are they don't exist. So the present moment is all we ever have. And so heaven is cultivating an inner sense of alignment and peace in the present moment. It's allowing life to be just as it is, not resisting, not clinging, but just allowing. And hell is like a resistance to life as it is. It's this inner angst, inner constriction. So really, it is just cultivating an inner atmosphere of integrity or alignment would be a good way to say it. Your true self is who God creates you to be. That's your essence, created in the image of God, a God who is love. So your true essence is love. And that's
mm,
our true identity, but we get lost from that and we create this persona or false self and we live into that our entire lives. So we're stuck in our heads, wearing a mask, trying to be what we think we need to be or present in a certain kind of way. And it can be good things. This is not necessarily,
mm,
something evil or sinister. Oftentimes it's very good. The mask that we wear is the good person that we
mm,
want to be seen as. But it keeps us alienated from our true self, our essence. And so heaven is cultivating a sense of living from that true self, which is to live from love. It's an expansive way of being in the world. And hell is just denying that true self and living into that false self. And it's false. It's not bad. It's just bogus. Um, and that's what the whole physical world is about. I mean, we should be able to be in the world, but see it for the illusion that it is, which means that
mm,
we don't cling to it, but we also don't resist it either. It just is. And I think people who reincarnate too soon, they are clinging to the physical. It's like that's where addictions are born out of that clinging that we can't, because something is pleasurable, we just can't get enough of it. And so then we overuse or whatever. So yeah, it's about balance. It really is just about balance.
mm. Okay, okay. Yeah. Yeah, going back to reincarnation, you were talking about reincarnation, and I was thinking, how does this work? Because say your grandmother, do you kind of think that she's there waiting? You talked about soul groups, and that's a whole nother conversation, which I love. Soul groups where possibly we reincarnate as a group and everybody has their role. Some people talk about it like a theatre play.
Mhm.
Everyone has their role and you have to play that role. And you might be a villain, you might be a goody, you might be the father, the grandmother, whoever. And then when you come back next time, you'll switch roles and play a
Mhm.
different role to have that full experience of what the theatre play is like. Now, I've summarized that down to this big out of a huge, big conversation that's very, very surface level. Do you think your grandmother's there? She's done her part of the play and she's actually just waiting in the wings for you all to come. Is she, it's not really upsetting the balance of reincarnation. I don't even know how to word this, Brandy. It's like if she's there waiting, is she neglecting her role in the balance of the reincarnation? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. That's a good question. No, the way that she explains it to me is that when we incarnate, there's like a constriction of awareness, if you will. That's why we don't remember our past lives, or we shouldn't remember. Most people don't. And then when we leave this physical body, there's an expansion of awareness. And with this expansion of awareness, we need to integrate. these things. We see with that clarity. And so the incarnation is a chance for exponential growth and learning because it's a world of duality. This 3D world
Mm.
is a world of duality. And to experience the joys in this life means that we will suffer also in this life, and suffering is often the catalyst that awakens us into our wholeness. So in between our incarnations, we do our inner work, is the way she tells the word that she uses to describe it. But it's an integration of all of these lessons. See, because once you leave the incarnation that you're in, and you're in that spiritual realm, you're able to see all of your past lives with clarity. And so you're able to integrate all of these lessons. So you do your inner work, you do your integration in between incarnations. And then when it's time, and with the other people in your soul group, if you choose to, because it is a choice, according to my grandmother, then you come back into another incarnation where, again, it's a constriction of awareness. So you forget all of those things, but you accumulate more karma, or you work out your karma, whatever the case may be. And we do have different experiences with each incarnation. The whole point of reincarnation is to allow us limited opportunities to awaken, because really all of life is designed to awaken us. That's the whole point, the meaning of life, the purpose. It's a wake up, let go. That's really all we need to do. But
Mm.
it's not so. It's simple, but it's not easy. And
Yeah.
so, we do our inner work, or integration in between incarnations. But it's not scripted. So while we do play these different roles, and we do get to experience various roles in this incarnated reality, like we may be different genders, we may live in different, cultures and, contexts, so that we get the full experience of what this life is all about. We know what it's like to be wealthy, and in poverty, and in
Mm.
sickness and in health. We get the whole experience. But it is not a script that we follow. It's not predetermined. We are free agents, and the future is always fluid. And none of those things ultimately matter, according to my grandmother, because we can always wake up. Because that's really the whole point, is to wake up and step out of that wheel of karma that just keeps driving us through these different incarnations. So it's to be free of all of that. While we do enjoy this physical world and the incarnations, different aspects, like everyone I have communicated with on the other side, they tell me they miss their favorite foods. My grandmother, one of the
Really?
first things she said was, I miss sewing. She was a gifted seamstress. She misses
Oh.
sewing, and she tells us that she misses it. My dog, who has been crossed since 2018, he misses his favorite foods also, and he misses touch, she tells me. But I asked her, I said, does he
Mm.
miss me? And she said, no, because he's with you, but he does miss food and he misses touch. So we do miss the physical incarnation when we cross. And we can come back for those reasons also, even if it's, just because we miss our favorite foods. We may incarnate just because we want to experience the physical
Yeah.
more fully.
Yeah. It makes me kind of sad that we might have that feeling of longing or missing, because in my head, the afterlife's perfect.
Mm.
This isn't very grounded, this what I'm saying here, but in my head there is no desire, there's no lack, there's no nothing. So I'm quite challenged by what you're saying. I think it's really
Hmm.
interesting. Now, you talked about how we go through, we learn lessons and we reincarnate and we have times here to learn and then eventually to be able to, what was your word that you used? Not become
The
enlightened.
awakened, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that what I said?
Yeah, then to become an awakened.
Hmm.
What is the point of that? What happens after that point?
Yeah, so awakening really is synonymous with enlightenment. Um, and you could also just say whole, to become whole, or to use psychological terms, to just come into alignment. So it's about authenticity, or being true to yourself. That's really what it is. That's what enlightenment really is. Seeing things as they are.
Are we
Mm.
talking in a spiritual way? Like I'm talking about once we've completed the lifetimes, completed the incarnations, we get we're awakened, we come into enlightenment.
Yeah. So, okay. So the point of reincarnation is that it really is a testament to the grace of God because it affords us unlimited opportunities to awaken, to become into alignment, to learn our lessons, to be whole. There are so many ways you could say it. Um, but we continue in this process until we do learn our lessons and we do come into wholeness. But once we do that, there would be no more reason really to you could reincarnate if you wanted because you're free to do so according to my grandmother, but most people wouldn't. Because if you have done all of your inner work, if you have learned your lessons and you have integrated everything and you have become whole, you have inner peace regardless of your circumstances and situations. And so also, I wanted to back up kind of also and address what you said about like when we cross, made you a little sad to think that people could cross and not be completely in a state of bliss or,
Mm,
completely happy that, that it's not like heaven once heaven in the sense, the traditional sense, I guess,
mm,
like no sadness or anything like that or no longing on the other side. But the thing is that the idea of death is really is kind of a death is one of those things that should not be. I asked my grandmother multiple times this question: Was there death before the fall? Like like in the Bible, it talks about the Garden of Eden and the fall, and
mm,
it says, "In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." I was like, was there really no physical death prior to the fall? And every time she would answer and say, "Yeah, there was no death." And I'm like, that just, it blows my mind because I would,
wow.
in my way of perceiving things, I would have thought, oh, that's metaphorical, or because there has to be death. If we're in these physical bodies and we're navigating this world as we know it, like the laws of physics apply, then how could death not be possible? Like if I breathe oxygen and suddenly I'm knocked unconscious and I fall into a body of water, would I not drown prior to the fall? I mean, how do I make sense of that? And what I have come to see in my communications with her is that it's because we fell into the physical. It's a density, it's a lower frequency. Matter is really just energy slowed down into matter.
Mm,
And this is why, like certain ascended masters have been said to their vibration becomes so high that they just vanish. I don't know if you've heard of that happening to people, but
yeah,
I've heard of cases.
yeah,
Yeah. And like Enoch, he walked with God and then he was no more. And again, this is beyond my ability to conceptualize or really
yeah.
fully understand it, but it seems that we are headed towards something much better than this 3D world that we're in, which is this
Mm,
physical world, or the quantum realm where my grandmother is, which is 4D. She would say she's in no, she's in 5D, she tells me. So there's the 3D reality, and then my grandmother's in, like the fifth dimension of reality where there is non-physicality. Like she could
mm,
manifest to us where we could maybe see her, like the image of her, but it wouldn't be physical, it wouldn't be tangible. She couldn't, we couldn't touch her. Our hands would just go straight through her. It would be like a
mm,
hologram or, a holographic image. But we are headed toward, as a collective, we are headed toward, well, the best, I guess, the easiest way for me to say it would be resurrection life, because you're coming from a Christian background, that would make sense to you.
mhm,
But it's a higher dimension than those dimensions where there are no tears, where the lion lays down with the lamb, where all duality has been reconciled, where there is peace within and without. But it's also physical and it's not. It's like Jesus appeared in locked rooms and then he vanished. He would materialize, dematerialize. He could eat fish though, and he was able to be touched. So it was something very tangible, but also not something like this 3D physical. So whatever that is where all of humanity is headed. Ultimately. But for a time, it is very sad that death is a part of our reality because when people die, we miss them, even if we know they're still
mm,
with us. Like me,
mhm,
I know that my grandmother is with me. I even get to talk with her. I know my dog is with me, and still it's sad. It's deeply sad
mm,
to not have those people here in a physical capacity
mm,
to interact with and to touch and to, we miss that. And then on her side of things, it's the same. She misses us in the same ways, even though she's with us
mm,
closer than in life, in reality, but still she misses physicality. And so this world is, it is broken or sad for a time, if you will. It's limited. That's maybe the best way to say it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
limited. But we're headed towards something that's not limited, something that is fulfilling, and we are all one, and we're headed back into that oneness.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. There's a little piece of me that's a bit excited about that as well. So
Mm,
take what you want from that. Um,
yeah,
I love this. Thank you so much. You've shared so much with us. I just want to wrap up with one final question because I could go all day
sure.
chatting with you because I think it's so interesting. How do you feel about your physical death?
Hmm. Well, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not ready. I feel
Yeah,
like
see,
there
I
are
relate with
things that
that.
I still, I still want to do some things and enjoy my life. And honestly, I'm at a point now where I finally feel like like a sense of that I'm on the right track, that I'm seeing the
Yay.
right things, that things are kind of, starting to click in a way. Not that my life is free of any, pain or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm able to integrate the lessons a lot easier. And so I'm excited to see where that is headed. And I would hope to be more I would hope to be able to let go a little more before I cross so that my crossing would be easier. But I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of it. And I know that death is just the doorway into an expansive journey of becoming whole. And so I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm also not afraid of it either.
Yeah, I love that. I agree as well. I believe that death is not the end of something. I think it's almost like a birth into another thing, and we're just
Yeah.
not quite sure what that looks like or how that works. But yeah, I love it. Brandy, thank you so much. Like I said earlier, you've shared so much with us. Such a personal experience. I'm still hung up on the going to the search bar and typing hello and everybody freaking out, running out the house, because that's probably what I'd do. But then I'd be so curious. I'd need to go and just peek around the corner and see if there's any other words that come up. The printer
Yeah.
piece, I'm never going to forget that. That's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can have a bucket list for past loved ones to come and contact you, but that's there.
Yeah.
You've got your book, which is Through the Veil, A Glimpse into the Afterlife. We'll put the link to that down below in the show notes. Brandy's also got an amazing website, all sorts of things that she's doing. So go and check out her work. Brandy Anderson, I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great to be here. Thank you so much.